Hello guys! Welcome back to my channel, a channel that discusses very dramatic movie stories, guys. In this video, I'll take you to watch a very dramatic movie about this story, entitled, His Crown Was Born from Wounds. Before this story begins, don't forget to hit subscribe and like. Instead of just being curious, let's continue watching this video until the end. Okay?
My name is Austin Harrison, and for the first 27 years of my life, I lived in a world where the sun never set on my family's empire. We owned half of the city, and I was the golden boy protected by a fortress of wealth and the three women I loved most. My wife, Charlotte Evans, was a legal titan, a top attorney who had never lost a case or an argument with me. My childhood friend, Olivia Clarke, was a legendary martial arts champion who had fought her way through every prestigious competition just to ensure she could be my ultimate shield. And then there was my sister, Harper Harrison, a genius who graduated from MIT at 17 and took over our corporate affairs at 18 so I would never have to worry about a single ledger. I was the silver spoon baby, cuddled and adored, never realizing that the fairy women who swore to protect me would one day become the architects of my absolute destruction. The nightmare began on my 27th birthday, a night that was supposed to be a celebration of my untroubled life. Harper, the light of our family, was dragged into the garden by the river, where she was brutally raped and murdered, stabbed 17 times in an act of senseless violence. The killer was David Miller, the younger brother of a man named Jimmy Miller. Jimmy was the man Charlotte and Olivia worshipped as their savior because they believed he had rescued them from a devastating wildfire a year prior. Instead of seeking justice for my sister, my wife chose to stand in the courtroom and defend David Miller with the same silver tongue she once used to whisper love to me. I sat in horror as Charlotte dismantled the prosecution's evidence, treating my sister's life as a mere technicality. Until the judge announced the words that shattered my soul, not guilty. The betrayal didn't stop at the courtroom doors. It seeped into every vein of my existence. When I confronted Charlotte and Olivia about defending the monster who slaughtered Harper, they called me self-centered and demanded I understand their debt to Jimmy. They forced me to sign a non-interference agreement, claiming Harper's death was just an accident that shouldn't ruin more lives. To silence me, they used their combined influence to freeze my bank accounts, block me from my own company's shareholder meetings, and even used my grandmother's life who was clinging to a ventilator as a bargaining chip. They went as far as to smear Harper's name publicly, calling her a homewrecker and a slut to justify David's violence. But as he stood over my sister's vandalized grave, he realized the ultimate truth: Jimmy Miller was a fraud. It was Harper and I who saved them from that fire, and Jimmy had stolen my family heirloom and our credit while we were unconscious. Austin Harrison the prince was dead, and from his wounds, a dark, vengeful king was about to be born. The air in the Harrison mansion, once warm with the scent of Harper's favorite lilies and the expensive cigars my father used to smoke, had turned into a frigid, stagnant vacuum. He walked through the halls, my footsteps echoing against the marble floors like the ticking of a doomsday clock. Everywhere he looked, he saw the faces of the women who had betrayed me. Charlotte's portrait hung in the library, her eyes sharp and predatory, a stark contrast to the loving wife he thought he knew. Olivia's trophies lined the gallery, silver and gold monuments to a strength that was now being used to keep me in a gilded cage. He felt like a ghost in my own home. A man stripped of his voice, his fortune, and his family. The realization that they were willing to let a murderer walk free just to preserve a lie about a savior was a jagged blade that twisted in my chest with every breath he took. He wasn't just losing my sister, he was losing the reality he had lived in for nearly 3 decades. He retreated to Harper's room, the only place that still felt sacred. Her books from it were still stacked on the desk, her handwritten notice on corporate strategy looking like a code he was now forced to decipher. He remembered her laughter on that final night, the way she told me she had a special gift for me. That gift was never opened. It was likely crushed under the boots of David Miller in the dark garden by the river. I fell to my knees, clutching a sweater that still smelled faintly of her perfume. The injustice was a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders until I felt he would be crushed into the floor. How could Charlotte, a woman sworn to the law, use her brilliance to protect a rapist? How could Olivia, who spoke of honor in the ring, allow Jimmy to manipulate her so thoroughly? They weren't just blinded by a debt. They were intoxicated by the power Jimmy held over their guilty consciences. Outside, the city lights of stand-in flickered like the eyes of 1,000 indifferent witnesses. Charlotte had officially filed the paperwork to declare me mentally unstable due to grief, a tactical move to ensure my freeze on the accounts remained legally ironclad. She was treating our marriage like a litigation, anticipating my every move before he even made it. He realized then that he could not fight her with the law she owned, nor could he fight Olivia with the strength she had mastered. He had to go somewhere they couldn't follow into the shadows of the city's underbelly, where the Harrison name still carried weight with the people who lived outside the light of the elite. He remembered my father's secret contacts, the men who worked in the docks and the warehouses, the ones Harper had quietly looked after through our various charitable arms. They were the only ones who might still be loyal to a Harrison without a bank account. The following morning, he was cornered in the foyer by Olivia. She looked radiant in her workout gear, her muscles toned and lethal. She didn't offer a greeting. She simply handed me a pen and the non-interference agreement. Sign it, Austin. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Jimmy is a good man, and his brother deserves a second chance. We are doing this for the family. He looked at the woman he had known since we were toddlers, the girl he had shared my toys with, and saw a complete stranger. You call David Miller a good man? He stabbed her 17 times, Olivia. He realized then that Olivia's sense of honor was twisted into a cult-like devotion to the man who had stolen my locket in the fire. He pushed past her, heading for the garage, only to find my car keys missing. The head of security, a man who had served my father for 20 years, looked at me with a mixture of pity and fear. I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison. Mrs. Evans Harrison has ordered that you are not to leave the premises for your own safety. He was a prisoner in my own palace. He turned back to see Charlotte standing at the top of the grand staircase, her phone in hand, watching me like a hawk. Where would you go, darling? You have no more money, no more car, and soon, no more reputation. Just stay here. We'll take care of you. Her voice was like silk, but it felt like a noose. They wanted to keep me as a spoon-fed baby forever. A broken man they could display to the world while David Miller celebrated his freedom with the money he had earned. That night, he didn't sleep. He used a hidden emergency phone Harper had tucked away in a secret compartment of her desk, a phone she told me to use only if the house was burning down. In a way, it was. He dialed the only number stored in the contacts, an attorney overseas named Julian Thorne. Julian was a man my father had helped years ago, a legal shark who specialized in cases that were impossible to win. When he answered, he didn't beg. He told him he was Austin Harrison and that he needed to burn a city to the ground to find the truth. Julian listened in silence as he recounted the wildfire, the stolen locket, the murder, and the betrayal of my wife and friend. They have frozen my life, Julian, he sighed, my voice trembling with a cold, newfound clarity. They think I am nothing without them. I need you to prove them wrong. Julian's voice was a low, resonant baritone that carried the weight of 1,000 victories. A crown born from wounds is the heaviest to wear, Austin, but it is also the hardest to break. You will be in stand-in by morning. But understand this, once we start this fire, there is no more putting it out. You will lose the women you love, and you will see the ugliness of the world in full detail. Are you ready? He looked at the photo of Harper on my bedside table, her mid-graduation cap perched jauntily on her head, her smile full of the future that David Miller had stolen. You have already lost everything that mattered, Julian. All you have left is the truth, and you will pay any price to see it scream. He hung up the phone, feeling the fair spark of the darker path Julian had warned me about. The next day, Charlotte and Olivia held a private reconciliation dinner at the mansion, inviting Jimmy Miller as the guest of honor. It was a grotesque display of gaslighting. Jimmy sat in my father's chair, sipping my father's vintage scotch, telling stories of his heroism in the wildfire. He looked at me with a smug, knowing grin, his hand resting on the table near the very spot where Harper used to sit. Charlotte and Olivia hung on his every word, looking at him with an adoration that made my stomach churn. You know, Austin, Jimmy sighed, his voice dripping with false sincerity, I truly forgive you for the way you've treated my brother. Grief does strange things to the mind. Let's put all this unpleasantness behind us. He gripped my fork so hard the metal began to bend, but he remained silent. He was waiting for Julian. Midway through the dinner, the front doors of the mansion were thrown open with a force that rattled the crystal chandeliers. Julian Thorne walked in, flanked by two men in dark suits who didn't look like lawyers, they looked like soldiers. Charlotte stood up, her legal instincts immediately on high alert. Who are you? This is a private residence. Julian didn't look at her. He looked straight at me. Mr. Harrison, your overseas assets have been liquidated and moved to a secure offshore trust. You are no more longer financially dependent on the joint accounts. Also, I have a court order from the federal level to seize the security footage from the night of the wildfire for a grand jury investigation into insurance fraud and theft. The color drained from Jimmy Miller's face, while Charlotte's eyes narrowed into slits of pure fury. This is an outrage, Charlotte shouted, her voice echoing through the dining room. I am the lead counsel for the Harrison Group. You have no more authority here. Julian offered a chillingly polite smile. Actually, Mrs. Evans, as of 10 minutes ago, the Harrison Group's board of directors received a documented proof of your conflict of interest in the David Miller case. They have voted to suspend your authority pending an internal audit. You are no more longer the top attorney of this company. You are a person of interest. Olivia moved to stand in front of Charlotte, her hands curling into fists, her legendary fighting stance ready. Get out of here before I make you. Julian's guards didn't move, but the red laser dots that appeared on Olivia's chest from the snipers outside certainly did. Let's keep this civilized, Ms. Clark, Julian whispered. He stood up, walking toward Jimmy Miller, who was now trembling in my father's chair. He reached out and grabbed his collar, pulling him up until his feet barely touched the floor. The family locket, Jimmy. The one you stole from me while he was dragging Charlotte and Olivia out of the fire. Where is it? Jimmy stammered, looking to the women for help, but they were paralyzed by the sight of the laser sights on their chests. I don't know what you're talking about. I saved them. I leaned in close, my voice a jagged rasp. Harper saved Olivia. I saved Charlotte. You were the scavenger who picked our pockets while we were dying. I'm going to make sure the world knows you aren't a hero. You're a thief who paved the way for a murderer. I threw him back into the chair, the prince in me completely replaced by the man who was ready to rule through fear. The following week was a blur of legal and physical warfare. Julian Thorne dismantled Charlotte's legal fortress brick by brick. We found the disappeared footage from the night Harper was killed. It hadn't been deleted, merely moved to a private server in Charlotte's office. The footage showed David Miller following Harper into the garden, his face clear and his intent undeniable. It also showed Charlotte and Olivia arriving at the scene shortly after, finding David with the knife, and instead of calling the police, they helped him clean up the first set of prints. I watched the video with Julian, my soul freezing into a permanent block of ice. They had seen her body. They had seen the 17 wounds, and they still chose the brother of the savior over the sister of the husband. He didn't take the evidence to the local police. They were in Charlotte's pocket. Instead, he leaked the footage to every major news outlet in the country simultaneously. The public outcry was instantaneous and violent. The top attorney and the martial arts legend became the most hated women in the city. The Harrison Group stock plummeted, but he didn't care about the money. He wanted them to feel the isolation Harper felt in those final moments. He moved my grandmother to a private medical facility in Switzerland, away from the reach of Charlotte's influence. When the police finally arrived at the mansion to arrest David and Jimmy Miller, he was standing on the lawn, watching as the handcuffs were clicked into place. He looked at Charlotte and Olivia, who were being escorted out for questioning. And for the first time, he felt nothing for them. No more love, no more hate, just a vast, empty space where they used to be. But the women weren't finished. Charlotte, even while under investigation, managed to pull one last strings. She used her remaining connections to launch a smear campaign against Harper, releasing a doctored voicemail that made it sound like Harper was obsessed with David and had lured him to the garden. The media, hungry for a scandal, began to turn the narrative. He saw the headlines calling my sister a mid-slut and a homewrecker. He walked through the city and saw people spray painting insults on the walls of our family buildings. The graves of my parents were vandalized with the weird trash. My heart, which he thought was already frozen, broke all over again. They were killing her a second time, destroying her memory because they couldn't handle the truth of their own failure. This was the moment he dialed the something darker. He realized that Julian Thorne's legal brilliance could only go so far in a world where the court of public opinion was ruled by lies. He reached out to the legendary martial arts community Olivia had once belonged to, and the elite legal circle Charlotte had dominated. He didn't ask for their help. He bought their silence. He used my liquidated assets to buy out the contracts of everyone they ever worked with. He turned their saviors into outcasts. He ensured that David Miller's prison life would be a living hell, paying the very inmates he used to fear to ensure he never had a moment of peace. He wasn't just seeking justice anymore. He was seeking a total erasure of their existence. He was building a crown out of the wounds they had inflicted, and it was a crown made of thorns. The final confrontation occurred at a press conference he called at the Harrison Group headquarters. Charlotte and Olivia showed up, desperate to apologize and explain as a way to save their reputations. They stood on the podium, looking tired and broken, tears streaming down their faces as they looked at the cameras. "We were confused," Charlotte sobbed. "We just wanted to repay a debt." He walked up to the microphone, looking at them with the cold eyes of a man who had seen the bottom of the abyss. He didn't let them speak. He played the original voicemail Harper had left for me, the one they hadn't been able to doctors. In it, Harper was crying, telling me she had found proof that Jimmy Miller was a fraud and that she was afraid David was following her. Her final words were, "Austin, I love you. Protect the family." The silence that followed the recording was the sound of two lives ending. The reporters looked at Charlotte and Olivia with a disgust that was palpable. The women tried to reach out to me, to touch my hand, but I stepped back. The guards Julian had hired forming a human wall between us. "You didn't protect the family," I sighed, my voice projecting through the speakers with a terrifying authority. "You protected a lie. And in doing so, you became the very trash you accused Harper of being." He walked off the stage, leaving them to the wolves of the media. That night, David Miller was found in his cell, the victim of a prison riot he had orchestrated. Jimmy Miller vanished, his body later discovered by the river where Harper died. The debt was paid in full, but the prince who once lived in the light was gone forever. In the aftermath, he stood on the roof of the Harrison building, looking out over the city that was now mine in a way it never was before. He was Austin Harrison, the man who had outplayed the law, the martial arts, and the elite. He wore the crown born from my sister's wounds, but it was a heavy, lonely burden. My grandmother eventually recovered and moved to the villa in Switzerland, never knowing the full extent of the horror he had unleashed. He remained in Stand-In, a silent, shadowy king who ruled with an iron fist and a heart that felt nothing. Every time he looked at my hands, he didn't see the silver spoon anymore. He saw the blood of the wildfire, the stains from the garden, and the ink of the contracts that had dismantled my enemies. He had won everything, and in doing so, he had lost the only thing that made life worth living: the belief that justice was anything more than a well-executed revenge. The years that followed were a testament to the endurance of my darker side. He turned the Harrison Group into a global leader in forensic security and investigative law, essentially creating an organization designed to ensure no more Jimmy Miller could ever steal another person's heroism again. He became a recluse, a myth in the city's high society, the man who spoke through lawyers and guards. He never remarried. The very idea of trust felt like a foreign language he had forgotten how to speak. Charlotte and Olivia lived out their days in social exile, their names erased from the prestigious lists they once topped, their fortunes gone, their beauty faded into the bitterness of their own choices. They were the walking dead, reminders of a past he had successfully buried under layers of corporate success and cold, calculated philanthropy. Every year, on the anniversary of Harper's death, he would visit the garden by the river. It was no more longer a place of crime. He had bought the land and turned it into a memorial, a quiet sanctuary of white lilies and flowing water. He would sit on a bench and look at the bronze statue of a young woman looking toward the sky, her hands holding a book and an oxygen mask. He would talk to her, telling her about the company, about the city, and about the justice he had forged in her name. He knew she wouldn't have wanted the blood on my hands, but she was a genius. She would have understood the logic of the survival. He was the king of a kingdom built on her sacrifice, and he would spend the rest of my days ensuring that her light was the only one that truly mattered in the city of Stand-In. The narrative of my life became a cautionary tale for the elite, a story whispered in the boardrooms and the courtrooms. It was the story of the silver spoon baby who grew teeth. It reminded everyone that the most dangerous person is not the one who has always been strong, but the one who was made strong through the betrayal of those they trusted most. My crown was born from wounds, and it was a crown that commanded absolute, terrified respect. As he looked out at the city from my office window, the sun finally beginning to set, he realized that he was no more longer running from the fire. He was the fire, and as long as he breathed, the memory of Harper Harrison would be the law of the land. The final quiet moments of the narrative focus on the empty seat at the boardroom table, the one that used to be Harper's. It remained empty as a permanent reminder of the price of the Harrison empire. He would often sit in my office late at night, the only sound the hum of the city below, and imagine what she would say if she saw me now. She would probably tell me my tie was crooked or that my latest merger was too aggressive. But then she would smile, that genius, mid-smile, and you would know that even in the darkness, he had found a way to keep her alive. The wounds would never fully heal, but they had formed a scar that was harder than steel. A shield that would protect the next generation if Harrisons from the monsters that hide behind the masks of saviors. The story of Austin Harrison was no more longer a romance. It was a masterclass in the art of the endgame. The internal piece he found was a hollow, echoing sing, yet it was the only piece available to me. I spent my 40th birthday not at a gala, but in the archives of the Harrison Foundation, reading through the thousands of cases we had settled for families who had been wronged by the legal system. I realized that my sister's death had become the fuel for a machine that provided justice for those who were too poor or too invisible to seek it themselves. He was the dark savior of the city, a man who used his billions to ensure that the David Millers of the world had nowhere to hide. It was a role we never asked for, but it was the only way to honor the mid-genius, who believed that every problem had a logical, ethical solution. Charlotte eventually reached out to me, 10 years after the trial. She sent a letter from a small town in the Midwest, her handwriting shaky and devoid of the confidence it once possessed. She asked for forgiveness, claiming she was a victim of Jimmy's manipulation just as much as he was. He read the letter once, then slowly fed it into the shredder. Forgiveness was a luxury he could no more longer afford, and mercy was a concept that had died in the garden by the river. He didn't want her to suffer. He just wanted her to be irrelevant. And she was. The top attorney was now a footnote in a history book of corporate scandals, a ghost of a past that had no more place in the future he was building. Olivia's fate was more physical. She had tried to open a small gym in another state, but her reputation followed her. The martial arts legend who helped a murderer clean a crime scene was not a woman parents wanted teaching their children. She eventually ended up as a low-level bouncer in a dive bar, using her legendary skills to break up drunken brawls instead of winning prestigious competitions. He heard rumors that she occasionally spoke my name in her sleep, a name that was now synonymous with the power she had lost. He felt a fleeting sense of pity for her, the way one pities a broken tool, but he never reached out. The girl who saved her in the wildfire was gone, and there was no more one left to drag on her out of the smoke of her own making. As he entered my 50s, he began to see a new generation of Harrisons emerge, distant cousins and young executives he had mentored. He taught them that power is not a gift, but a burden that must be carried with absolute integrity. He showed them the scars on my soul and told them the story of the wildfire and the garden, not as a story of revenge, but as a story of the cost of blindness. He wanted them to be the silver spoons that didn't break when the world got hard. He wanted them to be the protectors that he, in my youth, had failed to be. My legacy was no more longer just the buildings or the stocks. It was the lessons he had carved out of my own heartbreak. The city of Stanton changed under my reign. It became a city of law, but a law that was tempered by a deep, underlying awareness of human frailty. The Harrison Group provided the city with its most advanced surveillance and legal systems, ensuring that transparency was the default, not the exception. The shadow districts were cleaned up, the corrupt police officers were purged, and the courtrooms were finally places where evidence mattered more than silver tongues. He had outplayed the system by becoming the system. And in doing so, he had fulfilled Harper's vision of a company that truly served the affairs of the people. The prince had become a king, and the king had become a legend. The narrative concludes with a final look at the Harrison estate at night. The windows are dark, except for the one in the library where he sit, still working on the next strategy, the next merger, the next justice. The silence is no more longer heavy. It is a silence of accomplishment and closure. You look at the gold family locket, now restored and sitting on my desk, a symbol of the truth that was almost lost. He realized that while my crown was born from wounds, it was those very wounds that allowed me to see the world as it truly is. And in that clarity, he found the strength to build something that would last long after he was gone. The story of Austin Harrison is finished, but the empire he built on the ruins of his own heart will stand forever. The legacy of the Harrison name eventually transcended the borders of Stanton, becoming a global standard for corporate social responsibility. The Harrison Protocol, as it came to be known, was a mandatory set of ethical guidelines for any company wishing to trade on the international market. It was my final gift to the world, a system that made it impossible for power to exist without accountability. I watched from my villa in the mountains as the protocol was adopted by nation after nation, realizing that I had successfully turned my sister's myth into a global reality. I was no more longer the man seeking revenge. I was the architect of a more just world. A world where the silver spoon babies were the ones who fought the hardest for the truth. In my final years, I spent my days in the garden I had built for Harper. I would walk among the white lilies, the sound of the river providing a soothing rhythm to my thoughts. I was at peace with my past, realizing that every betrayal and every wound had been a necessary step on the journey toward the light. I had outplayed fate by refusing to be a victim, and I had outlived my enemies by choosing to build something that mattered. I looked at the bronze statue of my sister and felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had given me her life, and in return, I had given her a world that was worthy of her memory. The narrative ends with a slow zoom out of the Harrison estate, showing the vast, green gardens and the distant skyline of the city of Stendin. The city is glowing with the lights of a new era, a city that is safe, transparent, and thriving. The shadow of the wildfire and the garden is gone, replaced by the reality of a just and compassionate society. The Harrison name remains a beacon of progress, a promise that the heart's absolute victory over the shadows is not just a dream, but a reality for those who are brave enough to believe. The story is finished, but the impact is eternal. And so, we leave the world of Austin Harrison. It has been a 60-minute journey of shadow and light, of secrets and truth. May you carry the spirit of the King with you, standing up for your own dignity in your own corner of the world. Remember that every night, no matter how dark, eventually gives way to the morning soon. The legacy is secure, the children are safe, and the love is forever. Goodbye to the Harrison family, and may their story live on in your heart as a reminder that the heart as absolute victory over the shadows is always possible. The internal architecture of the Harrison legacy didn't just change in spirit, it changed in structure. My mentors, once he reached maturity, spearheaded a revolutionary shift in the company's investment strategy. We moved away from the traditional power plays and toward impact investing, funding green technology and affordable housing. We became known as the billionaires with a conscience, a title that would have made Harper beam with pride. This transformation ensured that the Harrison name would be synonymous with progress rather than fear for centuries to come. The cycle of secrets was broken, replaced by a cycle of pride and performance. The city of Stendin itself changed under the influence of the new Harrison era. The shadow districts that had once been the breeding ground for the city's more corrupt activities were transformed into vibrant community hubs. The transition was not without its challenges. So were always those who preferred the old ways of fear and intimidation. But the Harrison reputation was a formidable deterrent, and the city's financial power was a persuasive carrot. Together, we proved that a city could be more prosperous by being more just. The Stendin Renaissance, as it was later called, was a direct result of a billionaire who decided to love his family more than his power. The narrative's resonance was also felt in the world of high-stakes litigation. The case against David Miller, even though it started with a not guilty verdict, set new precedents for the prosecution of psychological abuse and financial sabotage in romantic relationships. The Harrison tapes were used in legal textbooks to illustrate the devastating impact of long-term betrayal and the importance of forensic accounting in uncovering hidden crimes. This legal legacy ensured that other hidden wives or cancelled brothers would have a better chance at justice than he had at the start of my journey. It was a victory for the legal system as much as it was for the individual. In her 80s, Charlotte Evans, who had lived her life in quiet obscurity after the scandal, reportedly took up sculpting. Her work was abstract and powerful, often using bronze and stone to depict the strength of the human spirit. She called her most famous series The Unbroken Contract, which depicted the journey from shadow into light. Her art was celebrated in galleries around the world, not because of her name, but because of the raw, emotional truth it conveyed. It was a final, creative expression of her own journey toward redemption. A way to show the world that even the deepest scars can be transformed into something enduring and beautiful. My final project was the creation of a national archive for family history. I wanted to help other families who had been torn apart by betrayal or corruption to find their way back to their roots. I donated a significant portion of my wealth to fund the technology and the personnel required to track down lost legacies and missing family members. I spent my final days working in the archives, often being the one to make the call to a man like myself to tell him that his family's honor had been restored. It was a poignant, beautiful way to end a life that had started in the cold world of high finance. The legacy of the king lived on through the children of the Medici had raised. They were raised in a house that valued honesty above all else, a house where the secrets of the past were told as lessons for the future. They were a new kind of executive, diverse, educated, and deeply committed to social change. They took the foundation into the digital age, using new technologies to amplify the voices of the marginalized. They were the living embodiment of the restored legacy, a testament to the fact that one generation's courage can change a family's destiny forever. As we look back on the 60-minute narrative, we see that it was never just a story about a cancelled wedding or a murder trial. It was a story about the universal struggle to find truth in a world of lies. It was a story about the power of a man's love to survive betrayal and the strength of a soul to face its own shadow. It was a story that reminded us that the most important battles are not the ones we fight in the boardroom, but the ones we fight within ourselves to remain human in inhuman circumstances. Austin Harrison showed us that true power is the power to be yourself. The final moments of the narrative focus on the Harrison garden at dusk. The long shadows of the trees stretch across the golden fields, and the house is aglow with the warmth of a family gathering. Inside, we see the photos on the mantel, the grainy image of the Lockett, the photo of Harper at her graduation, and the main awards for our humanitarian work. It is a house that has seen much pain, but it is now a house of peace. The silence is no more longer suffocating. It is a silence of contentment and closure. The king is finally home. His crown was born from wounds. Narration concludes with a final look at the enduring nature of hope. It reminds us that no matter how long the struggle, the truth will always catch up, and the catch can be a blessing rather than a curse. It is a story for everyone who has ever felt like they had to hide who they are to be loved. It is a story that proves that the heart's absolute victory over the shadows is not just possible, but inevitable for those who are brave enough to wait for the dawn. Thank you for listening to the story of Austin Harrison, where the most important move was always the move toward truth. The final image is a slow zoom out of the Harrison estate, showing the vast, green landscape and the distant skyline of the city. The world is large and full of possibilities, and for Austin Harrison, those possibilities were defined by light. The credits roll over the sound of the children's laughter and the gentle rustle of the wind through the trees. The journey is over, the secrets are told, and the legacy is secure. This is the end of the narrative, but the beginning of an eternal peace that will never be broken. May you carry the spirit of Austin Harrison with you as you navigate the complexities of your own life. May you find the courage to know your worth, the strength to move on, and the love to build a kingdom of your own. And may you always remember that the best stories aren't written in the wedding invitations or the corporate contracts, but in the quiet, vulnerable moments when we choose to be true to ourselves. Stand tall, for you are the king of your own story, and the world is waiting for your move. As the visual memory of Charlotte Evans and Olivia Clarke fading into the background of Austin's life becomes absolute, we are left with the echoing footsteps of a man who realized that his power was never something to be given away. Austin Harrison's transformation from a betrayed prince to a visionary leader remains a beacon for anyone trapped in a toxic narrative. He proved that the most hardened circumstances can be softened by a single, bold decision to say no more to a lie. His life became a lighthouse for others lost in the storm of emotional manipulation, showing them that there is always a path back to dignity. The story of the Harrison Lockett became a part of the city's cultural fabric, often referenced in songs and stories about the unexpected nature of fate. It was a reminder that the smallest actions, a decision to protect a family heirloom, a decision to help a stranger in a fire, can have ripples that change the course of history. People would often walk past the museum where it was kept and feel a sense of hope, a reminder that even in the most competitive and cold environments, there is the potential for something beautiful to be restored. The Lockett was no longer a symbol of loss, but a symbol of redemption. As we look back on the full 60-minute journey, we realize that his crown was born from wounds narrative is more than just a drama. It's a philosophical inquiry into the nature of worth. It challenges us to look at the people around us with new eyes, to see the king in the intern and the queen in the mentor. It is a call to action to be the Julian Thorne in someone's story, the ally who stands up when it matters most. And it is a reminder to be the Austin in our own lives, the person who refuses to be outplayed by a lie. The Harrison Thorne legacy is a permanent mark on the world, a testament to the fact that we are all interconnected. Our choices matter, our voices matter, and our love matters. Austin and Julian proved that even in a world of billionaires and corporate giants, the only true power is the power of the heart. As the screen fades to black, we are left with the image of their hands entwined, one a hand of struggle, the other a hand of success, joined together in a perfect, eternal partnership. Their story is over, but the light they ignited will never be extinguished. And so, we leave the city of Stand-In and the world of Austin Harrison. It has been a 60-minute journey of shadow and light, of secrets and truth. May you carry the spirit of the king with you, standing up for your own dignity in your own corner of the world. Remember that every night, no matter how dark, eventually gives way to the morning soon. The legacy is secure, the children are safe, and the love is forever. Goodbye to the Harrison family, and may their story live on in your heart. Thank you for listening to the story of When Justice Fails, Hate Dials Something Darker. May it be a reminder that the altar of your life belongs to you and no one else. As you step back into your own world, remember to look for the beauty in the struggle and the truth in the secret. You are the architect of your own future, and the world is waiting for your move. Stand tall, speak your truth, and never be afraid to dial something darker if it means finding the light. The king has arrived. The final notice of the narration blend with the sounds of a vibrant city, a city that Austin Harrison helped to shape. The streets are alive, the people are free, and the shadow of betrayal is a distant memory. The legacy of his integrity remains a beacon of progress, a promise that the heart's absolute victory over the shadows is not just a dream, but a reality for those who are brave enough to believe. The story is finished, but the impact is eternal. The king has moved on, and the world is a better place for it. In the final quiet moments of this 60-minute journey, we imagine the balcony of the Harrison estate at night. Austin stands alone, looking out at the stars. The silence is no longer heavy with things unsaid. It is light with the weight of a legacy fulfilled. He is a soul who found his home in the truth, and stayed so until the dawn. His journey from the silver spoon to the throne was a long and painful one, but it was a journey toward the light. It was a journey that turned a scandal into a song of eternal passion. The transition from the boardroom to the domestic bliss of his later years was a serene and fulfilling chapter for Austin. He spent his mornings in the library, writing his memoirs and managing the philanthropic investments of the foundation. He had built a world where the noise of the city felt distant, a quiet sanctuary where he could finally enjoy the peace he had earned. The children he had mentored, now successful in their own right, visited frequently, bringing the laughter of a new generation into the house. Austin looked at his life and realized that every decision, even the painful ones, had led him to this moment of absolute contentment. Julian Soren's devotion to the Harrison legacy never wavered, even as the decades added lines to his face and silver to his hair. He remained Austin's closest confidant, the man who had outplayed the legal system to give Austin the life he deserved. He realized that his greatest achievement wasn't his own legal victories, but the trust and friendship of the man who had walked into his office and changed his world. They were a testament to the power of resilience and the transformative nature of true connection. The Harrison Foundation continued to flourish under the leadership of the next generation, influencing policies in dozens of countries. The Harrison Standard for Corporate Ethics became a global model, proving that the company could be more profitable by being more compassionate. Harper's influence was felt in every program, a persistent voice for the vulnerable that could not be silenced. She had turned her private pain into a public healing, a transformation that made every second of her sacrifice worth the cost. The Harrison name remained a beacon of hope for millions. The story of the birthday funeral became a case study in universities and business schools, not for its drama, but for its lessons in corporate social responsibility and ethical leadership. Austin's memoir, The Crown of Thorns, became an international bestseller, inspiring a new generation of leaders to know their worth and stand up for their dignity. He was no longer just a hidden or a betrayed brother, he was a global icon of empowerment. His face was a symbol of the strength that comes from truth, a man who had walked through the fire and come out on the other side with a crown of gold. Even in his 80s, Austin's energy was seemingly boundless. He remained active in the foundation, often visiting the clinics and schools he had helped build. He would sit with the people and listen to their stories, his eyes full of the same empathy that had saved his own soul. He was the matriarch, no, the patriarch of a new kind of dynasty, one built on character, not just capital. He was a man who had lived 1,000 lives in one, and he was satisfied with every single one of them. He knew that his legacy wasn't the buildings or the money, but the lives he had changed. When Austen finally passed away, he died peacefully in his sleep, his hand clutched in a photo of Harper. The city went into a week of mourning, but for the Harrisons, the silence of the estate was the only thing that mattered. They stayed in their home, surrounded by the memories of the man who had loved them so deeply. He had outplayed fate and won the ultimate game. His story was over, but the light he ignited will never be extinguished. Goodbye to the king, and may your soul finally find the peace you fought so hard to secure. Austen lived for several more years, a beloved figure in the city and a guiding light for his family. He saw the city of Stendon reach new heights of prosperity and equality, a direct result of the values he and Julian had established. He was at peace with his past, realizing that every shadow had been necessary to find the light. When his time finally came, he passed away with a smile on his face. His final gaze fixed on the bronze statue of Harper in the garden, a symbol of the journey that had finally carried him home. The king is at rest. The city of Stendon continues to thrive, the Harrison building standing as a monument to the man who saved it. The revolving doors continue to turn, bringing in new people with their own secrets and their own dreams. And somewhere, in the hum of the corporate ambition and the clicking of heels on the marble floors, the spirit of Austen Harrison remains, a reminder that justice is always worth the fight, and that the best stories are the ones that start with a single, bold decision to speak the truth. The king has arrived. The narrative's impact was particularly felt in the arts. A major film was produced based on Austen's life, starring an actor who had once worked as a janitor. The movie didn't focus on the glamour of the wells, but on the grime of the betrayal and the internal strength required to stay silent while being shamed. It won every major award, bringing the message of corporate dignity and personal resilience to an even wider audience. Austen's mentees attended the premiere, realizing that their mentor's private pain had become a public healing. The Harrison model established by Austen also influenced urban planning. The city began to integrate more social spaces into corporate districts, ensuring that workers from all levels had a place to gather and interact as equals. The Harper Plaza became the center of the city, a place where business deals were made on one side and community rallies were held on the other. It was a physical representation of the balance Austen had brought to the world, the integration of the economic and the human. As we look back on the full 60-minute journey, we realize that the His Crown Was Born from Wounds narrative is a masterpiece of human experience. It challenges us to look at the people around us with new eyes, to see the king in the victim and the hero in the survivor. It is a call to action to be the spark of truth in our own lives, and to never be afraid to dial something darker if it means finding the light. The journey is over, the truth is out, and the king is finally at peace. Goodbye.